Yo, what's happening, Time Clan? It is your boy King Time X here, back with another video. And I have a couple of things to say first before I even start it. Number one, I actually got some help from Gratify with us in this video. Like, he's actually going to be editing the video, and that's why you'll be seeing like some different effects here. And on top of that, he also helped with the script as well. So be sure to check out his channel. I'll leave the link to his channel in the description. Actually, no, I'm probably gonna put in the community tab, honestly. And you're going to be hearing the Sanku a lot. Sanku, I think that's how you pronounce it. But whenever I say Sanku, then that's actually Deku's name in this story, Sanku. And his middle name is Izuku. I'm just saying that from right now. Anyways, let's get on with the video. We start this what if on a cold, dark night in a hospital room where we can see doctors and nurses operating on a woman. Her skin purple and her eyes black as night. Her screams filling the room as she was wrought with pain. But then it finally stopped as we could hear a child crying. The woman opened her eyes to see a baby cuddled in the doctor's arms, bawling her eyes out. "It's a girl," the doctor spoke as he handed the baby to the nurse to clean. The woman had tears of joy in her eyes until she felt that horrible pain once again and began screaming. The doctor and nurses began to treat her once again as they were shocked to discover that she was giving birth to twins. 1 hour passed and we see a man sitting on a chair waiting anxiously for the operation to be done with. He chewed on his nails until one of the nurses was standing in front of him smiling. "You can see them now, Mr. Ashido. Follow," she calmly stated as she was walking to the door with the man trailing behind her. When they were inside, they saw the woman holding 2 babies on each arm, and the woman, I keep on saying the woman, and the man was also crying tears of joy as he ran to his wife's side. "They're beautiful," the man whispered into his wife's ear. "What are we calling them?" She looked down at her children with love in her eyes. "Mina for the girl, but I'm not so sure about him." She looked at the boy with confusion on his face, and the man began to scratch his chin. What about Sanku, my father's name?" the man suggested, and the wife was smiling. "Sanku. I like that name." A few years passed, and now Sanku and Mina were both 5 years of age. As twins, should neither developing a quirk. "So, what do you plan on doing today, Sanku?" Mina asked her brother with cheerful eyes, which made Sanku squirm. "I don't really know, Mina. I usually like doing what you do, really." He dug his head in between his knees, and Mina came to pat him on the back. "Well, I'm really bored. Besides, it ain't fair if I pick what we do, right?" This caused Sanku to look at his sister, and he began to think. I want to be a hero," he said nervously before putting his head back, and Mina smiled at her nervous brother. "Okay, you be All Might, and I will be a villain. Let's see if you can catch me," she exclaimed before running off, causing Sanku to chase after her. They ran around the house, Mina being more agile than her brother and being able to do small jumps and vault over objects, which caused the boy to slow down a bit. "Slow down," Sanku pleaded with his sister as he was trying to catch his breath. "Never! I won't be caught by the likes of you, All Might," she exclaimed and got even faster, causing Sanku to do the same. She looked back and made a teasing face to her brother, but she saw his eyes go wide and tried calling out to her before she realized she tripped on herself and fell. She put her arms up to take the fall, but then sizzling sound could be heard. She opened her eyes and saw the ground melting, covered in a slimy substance. She looked at her hands and saw it was also covered with that substance, causing her to scream. With Sanku hearing this, he rushed at his sister's side. When he looked at her, he saw her just staring at her hands, and they were covered in slime. "Are you okay?" he asked as he went to grab her hand, which jolted her back to reality. "No, don't!" Before she could get it out, Sanku grabbed her hands, but they didn't burn. "Mina, what's this stuff?" he asked his sister with a look of confusion, but then his eyes went wide. Could it be your Quirk?" he exclaimed as he grabbed her other hand, admiring them. I had to tell Mom and Dad, don't move, Mina. Keep doing whatever it is you're doing." He dashed inside the house, and Mina just observed her hands. It didn't burn him, did he? Unlock a Quirk too? She thought this to herself as she couldn't help but smile. Their Quirks had awakened after all. A few minutes passed and their father took them to the hospital where they would be examined together. Both Mina and Sanku were waiting impatiently. "Man, I can't wait to see what your Quirk is, Mina," Sanku exclaimed. You can't wait. You can't wait. I just want to know what your Quirk is. I bet it's going to be awesome, and I haven't even seen it yet," she exclaimed as well. They were just bouncing off each other until one of the nurses called for them to be examined. They met up with a Quirk doctor who was at his desk looking over some papers when they came in. "Ah, Mr. Ashido, I presume these are the children. I'm looking over their results right now." "Yeah," the doctor told the father as the trio took their seats. "So, what's the diagnosis?" he asked the doctor, and he faced them with an expressionless face. "Well, your daughter Mina seems to have a simple acid Quirk. Nothing special about it, really." This statement broke Mina's heart a bit, causing her to hang her head low. "And my son?" he asked the doctor, and he grabbed another file from his desk. "Yes, that's the thing, sir. When it comes to your son, Sanku, it does seem like the same Quirk as his sister. That this does happen with twins, but his seems a bit more refined to say," he explained, which only confused the man more. "What do you mean by refined?" "Well, like I said, your son seems to be developing the same Quirk as his sister, but it seems he could control the acidity levels of his acid and probably even more." After saying this, Sanku was confused, and so was his sister. They didn't really understand it, but their father nodded at this revelation. "I see. Well, thank you for your time. We will contact you when their Quirks fully developed, sir." He bowed before the doctor in a respectable way, Mina and Sanku following suit. "Oh, it was my pleasure, really. Come back again, you two." He smiled at the children and they took off. "Do you know what they meant by more, Sanku?" Mina asked her brother, but he shook his head. "No, Mina, I didn't, but your Quirk sounds cool with all that acid talk. Never heard about that. I get to have the same one too." He ranted on and on as they were going back, but Mina was more self-conscious after the doctor said that her quirk wasn't special and her brother's was more refined. She didn't know what he meant by refined. Honestly, she didn't even know what the word refined truly meant. It sounded fancy though, and gave off the idea that Sanku's quirk was inherently better than her own. Her own. She didn't understand all the words the doctor said, but she grew to be a bit jealous of her little brother. The jealousy only grew when they ended up presenting their quirks in class the next day. Sort of like a show and tell, she supposed. At first, she was excited to show off her quirk, releasing a gray substance from her hands and having it cover a tree stump. The stump ended up being destroyed from the acid she produced. The other kids were impressed, but everyone's attention was quickly shifted over to Sanku, who was playing in a puddle. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary at first until something weird happened. It wasn't like the color of the water changed or anything, but oddly enough, the water began to have some sort of braining effect. The puddle of water became something acidic. So acidic, in fact, that it began to erode the ground itself, creating a hole in place of where the puddle was. Sanku blinked in surprise and squealed a little. A couple of the students saw this display of power and walked over to Sanku's area to look at the hole he created. They were confused. From what Mina told them, the two had similar quirks, but Sanku just changed the property of the water. The only resemblance they could see between the two quirks was the fact that they had melting aspects to it. Sanku was disappointed to see the puddle gone and tried filling up the hole with his acid quirk, even if it would only last for a little bit. The hole was small though, so even if it burned away more at the dirt, it was still a win in his book because he'd be practicing with his quirk, learning more about the inner workings of it. He stretched his hands out and began to fill up the hole with his acid. He wanted the acid to last for a little longer than the water did. He remembered the doctor mentioning how he could supposedly control the acidity levels as well, so he figured he would try and make it as harmless as possible. He closed his eyes in order to focus on controlling the level of acidity. He could feel the acid being released from his body and the slimy substance beginning to cover his fingers, but he didn't hear any sizzling sound, oddly enough. He heard gasps from other students, and he opened his eyes to look at what was going on. A couple of more students moved over to Sanku's location and gathered around him. They had curious looks on their faces. One grabbed a stick and began poking at the acid. They were pretty cautious of Sanku's quirk after seeing his earlier display and what Mina ended up doing to that tree stump when she used that acid she secreted from her body. They realized that there weren't any signs of melting going on with the substance Sanku released from his body though. They kept poking with the stick for a good minute, but there was absolutely nothing that happened to it. At best, it became a bit damp. Some other students ended up dropping stuff in Sanku's acid, wanting to see if there would be any effect, but nothing happened. Everyone's eyes widened at this realization, and many began to crowd the boy, asking questions about his quirk. Sanku wasn't necessarily as outgoing as his sister though, and began to feel claustrophobic, with so many people gathering around him at the same time. Everyone from Mina's group migrated over to Izuku's own, leaving her by her own lonesome self. Well, almost everyone. A boy with black hair, red eyes, and shark-like teeth stood by her side. His name was Kirishima, and he still wanted to see what else she could melt with her quirk. She almost wanted to cry seeing everyone from her friend group just leave her like that. She tried keeping Kirishima entertained, but she couldn't help but look over to her twins group. He was getting a lot of attention. so much attention that she could practically feel her jealousy increase here. It was small at first when they first learned about the quirks yesterday, but here he was getting treated as if he was all might of someone. She craved that sort of attention. Her jealousy of the younger twin ended up making her become blind by the resentment. She didn't realize at the time that he was trying to reach out for her, but she seemed so distant at the moment. He was calling out for help to escape the crowd, but she was too short-sighted to even notice. Kirishima realized this though and ran over to help the boy. He used all his strength to pull Sanku out of the crowd. Needless to say, Sanku was a little rattled from that experience. He thanked Kirishima and ran over to talk to her sister. Hey Mina, I tried calling out to you earlier, but you must have never heard me. Can't blame me though. Mina was silent though. Sanku was also silent for a moment. He was expecting a response from her, but his expectations were never met. He continued talking after that moment. So, did you see what I did back there? Pretty cool, right? Again, silence. This would continue for the rest of the day, with Mina actively ignoring her younger brother while Sanku would continuously try to get her attention. He didn't know what was wrong. Before today, the two were very close and practically inseparable. They talked to each other the most out of everyone, and they tell each other everything that was on their mind. To be given the silent treatment by his closest friend was strange to Sanku. Even when they were in the car ride home, Mina didn't even look at him. She didn't look at him at all. She just stared out the window as if she was reflecting back on something, but he didn't know what though. This bothered Sanku, but he assumed that she probably just had a bad day and she would be back to normal tomorrow. He was sadly mistaken though. As Sanku learned more about his quirk, his popularity increased and his relationship with his sister became more distant as well. This would continue to happen all throughout primary school and reach into their middle school years. By the time Sanku and Mina were 14 years old, their relationship had become so strained that it was as if they didn't even know each other anymore. As if they were strangers to each other. They barely had any interaction with each other. The most they would exchange with each other was a sentence or two, and that was mainly when they were with their parents, who would try and force interaction between the two. Usually with the usage of family dinner. Both Sanku and Mina were popular in their own right at school. Sanku for his incredibly powerful and versatile quirk, with just how much mastery he had over it, and Mina for being his enthusiastic sister, the party girl you could say, the pretty girl every girl wanted to be and the girl every guy wanted to date. She could dance and was incredibly acrobatic. She had skills to separate herself from her younger brother, but she would still get compared to him from time to time. This irked her to no end. Sanku was smart, unlike his sister, extremely intelligent actually. He was creative, but stiff in his movements. He wasn't as fluid as his sister, but that didn't take away from his strength. He was like a big brother for many of the students though, although he was a bit of a dork, socially awkward, not nearly as extroverted as his sister. He was on the quieter side too, focusing more on his studies, training his quirk alongside his body in order to increase the chances of making it into UA. By making it into that school, it would be a huge milestone for him. Azuku and Mina shared a class this year, but they sat on opposite sides of the classroom, so it didn't mean much at all. their teacher walked into the homeroom, mentioning something about looking into their future careers while holding a pile of paper, but he laughed and let the papers fly. He already knew everyone in the class wanted to be heroes, and he mentioned how a couple of students from the class would actually be trying out for UA this year. So, Sakuna, Izuku, Ashido, Mina Ashido, and Hiroshima Ichiro. The three's eyes widened hearing this and looked over at each other. Sakuna was, well, he wanted to say something, but Mina just glared at her brother before looking away with her arms folded. Kiroshima's sweat jumped at the interaction and clutched his desk, thinking back to a certain event and how he had met a certain hero that day too. That's how part 1 is going to end for right now. I got nothing else to say. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Go check out Graphite with F's channel as well. I will leave the link to his channel in the community tab, because that's probably like the better place to go for it, honestly. That's all I got for right now. King Ty next, out.